Well, guys, thank you for coming. I'm sure some others will join us in a bit, but in case you don't know it, this is a class on marriage. And we've entitled it, We've Only Just Begun. And one of the questions I got a while ago was, what qualifies as a newlywed? My answer was, it depends on you. Some of you are just absolutely beginning. I've met several of you that have been married like only a month, and some 2 years and whatever. And it doesn't matter to me if you've been married 25 years. You want to be a newlywed. That's fine. It all depends on you and what you want in your marriage. And we're going to have fun today. My name is Baird. I was married 56 years. I lost my wife 4 years ago, but it was an incredible marriage. And this is the bookends here. They've been married a little over a year. And we thought it would be good to sort of get the full range here of what it's all about. Because most of you are just getting started. You're trying to figure out, okay, where are we going with this thing? And hopefully you're excited about it at this point. I hope you're not disappointed in this point. That would not be good. But we have found out that the first year of marriage, or the first couple of years of marriage, are incredibly important. Because during that time, you set patterns for your marriage. You set expectations for your marriage. And so we've found that it's really important to start right, to set the path, to set the vision, to set the goals from this time. And I was talking with an evangelist day before yesterday of one of our largest churches. And his question was, Al, what can we do? We have got couples that were married as disciples in the church that have been married 25 years that don't even sleep in the same bed anymore. That basically they're disappointed in their marriage. And his question, well, what can we do about it? Well, one of the answers is start right. Set the patterns early and the expectations early. And that's what we want to talk about today, because it's so much simpler to do it right than it is to remake it. Now, you can remake it. I mean, a lot of people have remade it. But it's so much more fun, and it's so much easier when you just do it right. Now, at the danger of trying to sell something, Gloria and I wrote a book that summarizes a lot of what we taught and we believe. We've done hundreds of marriage seminars and so forth, and a lot of marriage counseling. And interestingly, before I lost Gloria, our 3 girls got together with us and said, Mom and Dad, you need to write a book so you'll leave us your message for us. And so that's what we did, and we're really proud of it. I think it covers 30 topics that I think that are very important in marriage. It's available in the bookstore here. But today, Aaron and Brandy, who are newlyweds, and us are going to cover 10 of those topics. I gave them the choice. They could pick the 10 that we cover today. Now, we may not cover all 10. I don't know. It depends on how much they talk and how much I talk and so forth. But anyway, that's our goal, is to cover these 10 topics today. And so in each of these topics, they're going to share their vast experience in their first year of marriage and the convictions that they've come up with that I think will be very helpful to you. Now, understand, when we talk about these things, these are majorly generalizations. For instance, usually it's the man that has a greater sex drive. That's not always true. And so you've got to be careful how you generalize. And so understand that. It's not always the way that we may simply present it. So let's start off with a prayer. Father, thank you so much that in your wisdom you created marriage. That it's really, in my mind, the greatest institution that we've got. And it's so much fun. You designed it to be great, to be fun, to be an adventure. And thank you for each one that's here. Most of them just beginning on their journey. And I pray that today will really be helpful for them. So first of all, we're going to talk about the first topic, which is make God the architect of your marriage. Now, the verse that applies in so many situations, but I think so much in marriage, and this is really, we start our book off with this fundamental verse. Unless the Lord builds the house, its builders labor in vain. And that's really true. You just cannot, I mean, as we know, the majority of marriages fail in divorce. But it's said that 80% of marriages die in the heart, generally speaking, in the United States. But you don't have a prayer of building a great marriage unless you do it God's way. And, Gloria and I, when we started off, we were total novices. There was no such thing as pre-marriage counseling then. A lot of marriage books had not been read. We were totally ignorant. Both of us were virgins when we married. We didn't know a thing about what we were doing, but it was sort of fun discovering it. And so our wedding night was a great adventure. It was so encouraging and exciting that we were so happy that we said, we need to thank God for tonight. And so we prayed together that night to God, thanking Him for our marriage. But that began something for us that from then on, every single day together, the next 56 years, we prayed together. And that's number one. I want to encourage you in that. If you're not doing it, if you haven't started the pattern yet, pray together. I'm not talking about a 15-minute quiet time prayer, but just a good morning God, a good night God. And Gloria's called this the glue of our marriage. One of the times it's really helpful when you're mad at each other. When you're mad at each other and you pray, you get humble. And it's really helpful. But anyway, Aaron is going to start off talking about making God the architect.
Yeah, I love what Al shared. I think for Brandy and I, in the same way that they talked about like their marriage night, I think when we started dating, when we started like pursuing each other, we thought, and we got married, we were like, okay, this marriage is a blessing from God. And it's not about us, and we wanted to make it about God. And so one of the things that Brandy and I did, we found a theme scripture. And our theme scripture is Colossians 3, verses 1 through 2. It talks about being focused on things above. Because we don't want to focus just on our marriage or on our lives, but we want to focus on the eternal picture. And so, every time that we have a decision to make, that's something big, we always go back to the passage of like, hey, we want to focus on the eternal perspective, not just like right now. And then the whole prayer thing is funny because in our vows, we knew Al beforehand. He told us about the prayer, and in our vows we're like we vow to pray with each other every single morning, and that actually didn't happen because we found out that Brandy cannot speak early in the morning. So what she decided to do was like, okay, I'll pray. She'll pray at night, and then I'll pray in the morning. And so we do fight to make the space to pray together often. We just don't do it in the morning. We do it at nighttime. And then another thing, just making God the architect of our marriage. We get to serve in the campus ministry, and that's awesome. But it could be really natural for us to be mission-minded with the campus ministry. It doesn't make it easy, but we want to be we try to be intentional about like being mission-minded with our marriage. And a goal of ours is to baptize another married couple. And so we really try to look for opportunities of like, who are other married people? We're not going to find that in the campus ministry, but where are other married people that we can really reach out to? Because, we've noticed that our marriage has been way different from our family and friends in the world. And so we have something special to really share with other people who don't have a Christian marriage. And so those are some of the things that Brandy and I have talked through of like, this is kind of the things that we try to do to make God the architect of our marriage. Those are the things for making God the architect.
Secondly, appreciate your differences. It's really interesting when you're dating, you sort of think about, man, we are so alike. We like the same music, we like the whatever, and you get married, and suddenly you realize, we got a lot of things different. A lot of preferences of How do you do the toilet paper? Whatever. And that can cause some problems. I mean, we can laugh about those things, but, you know, it can cause problems if we don't understand that we need to not just recognize the differences, but we need to appreciate differences. You know, the goal is not just to tolerate each other. The goal is to realize that God has put you together as two unique people, that when you do it right, you're actually stronger and you're better because you're different. And we need to appreciate each other's strengths in that way. Aaron?
So this is actually one of my favorite topics because, like Al said, Brandy and I found out we are so different in so many ways. And one example of that is in the mornings. I like to wake up and think I'm going to conquer the world. Brandy wakes up and doesn't want to speak for the first 3 hours of her day. And that caused a lot of friction because I'm like, hey, I want to talk about this topic, or I have this thing on my mind. And I'm like, babe, I start talking, and she's like, I'm like, what do you mean you can't? You're my wife. Like, we should be talking right now. It's morning time. Like, who else am I going to talk to? But I really had to learn to appreciate that Brandy's going to have a better day and in all areas if she spends her morning with a coffee in her hand and, you know, reading her Bible and everything being quiet. And so for me, that was really hard, but I had to learn, like, oh, no, like, this is going to help my wife. And so now I wake up, I get the coffee going, and I just chill with the dog for a little bit, and I get Brandy up, and then we kind of, you know, we have our quiet time together and things like that, and it's quiet. So that's one area that we really had to learn how to, you know, appreciate each other's differences. And I think as we keep going on the different topics, you'll notice that Brandy and I we do things a whole lot differently. So yeah.
Okay, next one is a big one. This is one of the top 3 problem areas in all marriages. And obviously when you're getting married and you're just starting out, you got to work out all these things. And this is part of you realize, you know, we're really different from one another. And, you know, the men and women basically are very, very different from one another. If you haven't learned that yet, wake up. In the bedroom, that's especially true. An author that I like in a very old book that's called Intended for Pleasure is by Dr. Ed Wheat, has a quote that I love. He says, if a man does what is natural to him, he will be wrong almost every time. And you probably found that out. Is what comes natural to a man is not necessarily what your wife wants. And what your wife wants is not necessarily what you want. And working these things out is so very, very important. Now, we put romance here first. Guys, let me say this. Romance is not foreplay. For a guy, hey man, if we're holding hands and we're looking at each other in the eyes and kissing and loving each other, man, next step is a bedroom. That's not necessarily true for your wife. Romance can lead to great sex, but many times it should not lead to great sex because they don't need to be tied together, and you're going to get in trouble if you tie them together. And if you have that kind of expectation, you're going to run into bumps and you're going to hurt each other's feelings. And so understanding romance is a huge deal in marriage. You need to be romantic for the rest of your life. You know, Gloria and I always held hands together. We always kissed after every prayer for a meal. We always, all those kind of things. We looked at each other's eyes deeply. We told each other many times a day that we loved each other. Those are all romantic things. And that's a very, very important part of marriage. But don't necessarily relate it to the bedroom. Now, it can lead to the bedroom sometimes, and that's great, and that even makes it better. And that of course, then gets into the whole area of expectations, and we got a whole separate point on expectations. But expectations in terms of the sexual relationship can create a lot of problems. Because most of us men, whatever that was, most of us men obviously want to be sexually fulfilled, but a part of that sexual fulfillment for most of us men is satisfying our wife sexually. But the wife doesn't always look at that in the same way and doesn't always need the same thing that we think that they need. I mean, early on, this is partially R-rated. I made a mistake early on that my mindset was, Gloria, you're going to have an orgasm whether you want one or not. That doesn't work. In case you haven't discovered that, that doesn't work. But remember, we were married when there was no pre-marriage counseling, there were no books on sex, there were no whatever. We learned things the hard way, but you know what? Sometimes learning things the hard way are kind of fun, too. You sort of discover some things in each other. But one of the things that caused us problems early on was this idea of orgasm. Because one of the things that research has shown in recent years, it hadn't even been discovered back then, that only 1 out of 6 women can have an orgasm by intercourse. Their orgasm normally comes by touching or by oral sex. And Gloria was not one of those 6. And so we were not able to have an orgasm by intercourse. And as such, Gloria got the feeling there's something wrong with me. And we sort of had the feeling there's something wrong with, what's wrong with us? Well, there wasn't anything wrong with us. But lo and behold, by trial and error, we discovered oral sex, and the world began. But if you don't know those things, you can have some hard times with each other. And one of the things is, again, expectations can lead to a lot of problems, and they're going to talk more about expectations in this. But the real answer is to be vulnerable enough to teach each other what you want to do. And this is harder for guys because guys, hey, we're supposed to know what to do. We don't know what to do. And when you can get vulnerable enough with each other to teach each other what pleasures you, what pleases you, that's when things really get good. Brandy?
Cool. So I think I think for us, I think we can all understand that intimacy, whether it be sexual, emotional, physical, at any length, is one of the most crucial parts of your marriage, and it always will be. And I think for Aaron, one of our first steps was understanding the roots of that and understanding the roots of where we've come from in our families. And I think for the both of us, we come from pretty broken families across the board on both sides, a lot of abuse, addictions, divorce, you name it, we have it on both sides. But I think we've given a lot of gratitude to God in that, even in our partnership. But then more into our intimacy, I come from a background of sexual abuse, and Aaron comes from a background where he has struggled with objectifying women and just living in that realm of life. So I think to bring that even into our intimacy was something really difficult to navigate, but made us very grateful for vulnerability. It made us very grateful for the ability to constantly communicate. And even now we have a lot of check-ins of like, hey, are we good? Do we feel good about that? Do we need to change it up? What's working, what isn't working? And ultimately we just have so much gratitude to God that we even have what we have. Because we talk a lot about, even though we've been married for a year, we don't even know if we would have made it this far if it wasn't for God and his creation of marriage, and the beauty and the pureness that he's placed into it has ultimately been our success thus far.
Next, I think I passed one up here. Let's see if I can go backwards. Be equal partners and show love as they need it. A lot of you, hopefully, are successful with 5 Love Languages by Gary Chapman. If you're not, you need to get that book. Because what showing love is to one person is not necessarily their love language. And probably your love language is different than your partner's love language. And so it's important to discover each other's love language. You may have a couple of love languages. But if you assume that giving your partner, trying to please your partner in the way that you are pleased, you may miss it and you may not understand it. Why are you not responding in the way I expect you to respond? And it may be because that may not be their love language. And so it's important in this whole process to figure this whole thing out, showing love in the way they need it, not in the way you think they need it. And that again gets back to this whole idea, and we'll talk more about it in communication. But part of this is being equal partners. There's not really, now biblically, there are responsibilities, men and wife. But still, in God's eyes and in each other's eyes, we are equally valuable to one another. It's not a matter of I'm over you, do what I say, whatever. That needs to be out the window in our relationships. Brandy.
Yeah, so for us, I think we've understood that to be equal partners does not necessarily mean equality. I think for us, we've understood that God has made both woman and man separate, but in his image. So in that, we more so fall under the concept of equity. And that basically means that both parties are able to contribute according to their strengths, and in that make the end goal happen, right? So I think for us, we've really been able to take this to heart. And Aaron and I have a different situation than most people. We are both in the full-time ministry. We lead the campus ministry at Arizona State, which means that we're coworkers, which means that we're together all the time. And I would say that we're probably apart like 10 hours a week, like at most. So I think in that we are very familiar with each other, but in that it does come with its downfalls of, we could go on autopilot or just be friends or just be coworkers depending on the time. But we've had to really look into this concept of showing love and being equal partners because of that, right? We have to constantly overcome the fact that we always need to love each other and that we always need to put each other first and be married first, not be coworkers, not be ministry partners together. But then this concept of having equity is really important, just even in our home, where I think chores is like a big thing, right? And so I think that there's some chores that we have both agreed on, okay, like the bathroom, the floors, the kitchen, we'll go 50-50 on that. But stuff like cooking, I'll take the car work. He's like a part-time mechanic. It feels like he can take care of that. I think in that we've really been able to look at our strengths and really allow that to benefit our house. And it's cool because I think we're laying the foundations of the life that we want to further create. And I think that this first year in doing that and creating these little habits has already kind of contributed to that.
This next one is a big one too. Is obviously, and this ties in with God being the architect. And that is setting the right priorities. From how you spend your time, how you spend your money, expectations of when you're going to have kids, all those kind of things are so valuable in setting those priorities together. Because you probably come into marriage with a different set of priorities. You probably have different expectations of what marriage is going to be like in terms of what you want when. And a part of the process is working all that out together and really becoming a team and setting those priorities together. And one of the keys to this is being the best friend in the world to each other. Not being a best friend, but being the best friend. And I think this is one of the things that gets marriages in trouble, is that, hey, we're good friends. But that's really different than you being my very best friend. I can honestly say that for Gloria and me, for 56 years, we were absolute best friends. And, I get troubled sometimes when I read Jesus saying in heaven, there's no marriage. because that's sort of a disappointment to me, because I would love to continue what we had, but I do pray to God, God, please let there be best friendships in heaven, because I want Gloria to still be my very best friend in heaven. I want to experience that. I know whatever it is, it's not going to be disappointing in heaven. Amen. I understand that. But I think that one of the pieces of advice I give to couples who are dating, I says, do not date a person who is not going to be your very best friend. Because this is a key, I think, next to following God, to a successful relationship. Because if you're very best friends, then you're going to work through almost anything together. All right, Brandy.
Okay. So obviously this is probably where it gets exciting, right? You get to be best friends, and I think that's something that Aaron and I really enjoy. And again, that's where our line of work is really fun, because we get to live our dreams together in a career that we both really pray to have. And I think this has made the concept of, one, just setting the right priorities has been the foundation of being able to be best friends at the capacity that we are. But in setting these priorities, we've had to understand that our ministry and our home life it's small, and it's just the two of us, but it matters, and it's first. So I think for us, we have a lot of talks about like it's just two of us and our dog, but that is our ministry, and we have to prioritize it. So that's allowed us to honestly just create a lot of boundaries in our lives. And again, we lead campus ministry, and they'll go all night, but at some point we have to check out, we have to go home, we have to be functional together to meet each other's needs. We have to say no to different activities with our single friends, or maybe prioritize our married friends, or prioritize mentorship, prioritize our date nights, prioritize our Sabbath, prioritize all the things that spiritually, emotionally, and physically are going to allow us to be more successful, because we want to set our home life right. And it's awesome because what we're doing now we know is going to infiltrate our life even as we have kids, as we build our family. And it's funny is at home, a lot of guys do it, but Aaron will go in the fridge, get the juice, and drink it out of the jug. I hate it. I can't do it. So one day, I would always yell at him like, hey, pour the cup. I don't care if it's like an inch of juice, pour the cup. And he was like, why do you always want me to do this? And I was like, I don't want my little grimy kid to like have his mouth all over the cup. So if they see you do it, they'll do it. But it was really little, but it was one of those things where like, that mattered to the both of us. And he was like, oh yeah, totally. Like, I won't ever do it again. Where we decided like, this is going to contribute to the rest of our lives. And it's little, but it's going to go a long way if we keep that habit of respecting the way that we want to build our future. And that, again, it's trickled into our life as best friends. And we've just gotten to start to travel and see the world together. And it's such an amazing experience to build memories that we didn't get to have as kids, but two, we're laying down this legacy and this life that we're really proud of, and we're excited to live together and then bring a family into this as the future goes. So.
Okay, this next one is the number one problem in marriage, and that's communication. And think about the disagreements that you've had already, and if you've been married a day, you've already had one. That communication is always at the bottom of it, because we think we can be really good at communication. We think we can be saying something that is clear, but our mate may not have a clue what we just said, because he or she is interpreting it through her filter. And so developing good communication with each other is huge. And going along with that is this whole thing of expectations. Now, expectations in and of themselves are not bad. Where they get bad is when they're not spoken. And you know what I'm talking about? Is because when you have an expectation and you haven't said what the expectation is, and they don't have a clue what the expectation is, You expect them to behave in a certain way, and they don't have a clue what you want. And so they don't know why you're upset. Because we sort of go into this thing, well, you ought to know what I need. It don't work that way. I don't have a clue what Gloria needs if you don't tell me what you need. And so you've got to understand this whole thing of unspoken expectations. Probably, my guess, will probably go to at least 50% of the problems you have in your marriage. It's because you're expecting something you have not yet verbalized. It may be in the kitchen, it may be in the bedroom, it doesn't matter where it is, but if you're laying out expectations that they don't have a clue what you're talking about, and in this area of communication, communication is a whole lot bigger than words. In fact, the words are a small part of communication. The biggest part of communication is nonverbal. Now, you can say the same words and mean totally different things by the look on your face or by the tone in your voice. And so it's really important, and this is going to be, quite frankly, something you're going to work on the rest of your life. It's not something you're going to, we've been married 6 months and we got this communication thing down. No, you don't. Because once you're on a smooth path and you feel like you're doing good, guess what? Your life situation changes. Things change. The first kids come, whole new ball game. The time of the month comes. The whatever comes. Always a change, and it changes communication. It changes the need for communication. Aaron and Brandy are going to tackle this one.
It's a big one. So what's funny is Aaron and I, we both struggle in this, as I think we all do. But we struggle in this in different ways, where I struggle a lot with just expectations. I think for me, I am a very particular, I like things a certain way. I'm a type 3 Enneagram. I'm the executive on the Myers-Briggs. I live within a schedule, and this is a part of our life where we've learned to appreciate our differences. But again, I struggle a lot with expectations, and kind of what I was mentioning, I struggle a lot with the hey, wouldn't you know that this is what I would need? Why didn't you tune in? Or shouldn't you have known this was coming up? Why didn't you take this initiative? But I've learned, and I'm still learning, that this is a struggle point. This is something that it's really easy to want what I want, but I have to learn to not be angry or not to react when my unspoken, wants weren't met. And I've just even learned that just isn't fair to now be angry or put him in a corner because he didn't do something that I never asked him to do. That at the end of the day, I think he always is trying his best, right? So I can't put him in a different category of saying that he wasn't trying his best when he was actually doing his best the whole time. So it's a learning curve for sure, and I think we're still growing in it. So.
Yeah. So this is hands down why Brandy and I always have an argument or a conflict. So if we have a conflict, I'm like, yeah, something wasn't communicated, something is going on here that we didn't talk about. So like I said, Brandy and I are really different. She's really organized. I fly by the seat of my pants. I like, you know what I mean? If a last minute change happens, cool, let's do it. I don't, it doesn't really matter to me. So I really had to learn that there's certain things that Brandy thinks is going to happen, and she has these expectations. And I don't got to know her expectations. I just got to communicate what my day is like. So I've learned that every single day before we go out the door, all right, this is what I'm doing today. And I just communicate everything that I'm doing so that way she knows, because there's going to be something in between that wasn't said if I don't communicate what I'm doing today. So that's something that we do every single day, talk through your day, because we work together. And so, just a quick example of that. Yesterday, I don't know if you guys were at the marriage class yesterday. Zilman's talked about that awkward dinner where everyone's just kind of quiet, or you're just quiet looking at each other. We had that lunch yesterday. We were just looking at each other.
Right before the class, so.
And it was because, yeah. But it's because we didn't talk through what we were going to do at the conference. Brandy had took the initiative to, get the flights, book the hotel. So I'm like, oh, cool, Brandy got it. That's her gift. So I'm like, I'm going to let her do, her thing. That's cool. And, I'm like, whatever class, I like to go to, I'll just go to it. And then some type of schedule thing happened, and it just kind of blew up because communication wasn't had, and we were like not at the right appointment. I don't know. So something happened. So usually I know, like, I should talk through these things with Brandy. Hey, we're going to this conference. What do you want to do? And I didn't do that. But then Brandy has her side of what happened in that situation. She's going to share about that yesterday situation.
I didn't do anything. For me, again, it was his communication, but then my expectations, right? I think in the beginning, I took a lot of liberties. I was like, I'm going to do the flight, I'm going to book the hotel, because again, that is a little bit more my wheelhouse and preference. But I think in those liberties, I kind of put myself of like, I'm kind of running what we're doing this week. And that was an easy assumption to make. And I think what we ended up learning was that neither of us communicated anything. We just kind of showed up and were both expecting what we were expecting, not communicating what wasn't being communicated. And I think it left us both in a position to both be sour and to both be upset with where we landed. But it was really easy to then be like, oh, so what were you expecting and what didn't you communicate? And then figuring out that you were on the same page the whole time. But you hadn't talked about it. We hadn't talked about it. And I think it ended up, allowing us to see like we are for each other. We're always going to be for each other. We just need to talk through it to remind ourselves that we are there. So it was just funny because then by the end of the night, we were talking to Al about it. And he's like, oh, hey, lack of expectations and communication. So it's a very constant thing. And like he said, that's our constant fight. And I think something we're both growing towards. But I think like most things, we've taken the time to discover our roots and like where it does come from, where does my expectations and placing them come from, where does his lack of communication comes from. And in that, I think we've been able to grow stronger and grow in this area.
Yeah, so we were going to share about a conflict from last week, but then we had one yesterday, so we're like, let's share that one. Yeah, so.
Next, forgive everything. And guess what? There are a lot of things we need to forgive each other for. The problems come when you don't forgive. Because what happens, you go through enough different, it may be minor arguments, it may be minor disagreements, but if you don't get to the point of resolution of forgiving each other, those things build up and eventually will turn into bitterness. And sometimes you'll get a reaction that will be a huge reaction to something that to you seems very minor. You can go to the bank on the fact something else is going on. It probably goes to something else that wasn't resolved. And by resolution, I mean resolution doesn't happen without bringing it to the point of forgiveness. And, you will have fights. Anybody here hadn't had a fight yet? You're probably lying. Any two people together are going to have disagreements. What do you call it? I don't call it a fight. Whatever you call it. You're going to have things that you get upset with each other on. That's just natural. That's going to happen in a relationship. But the point is, do you resolve it? Do you work through it? Gloria and I came up, it's one of the chapters in the book, called 10 Commandments for Fighting Fairly. And I think we mainly learned it the hard way, of things we learned that didn't work. And over time, we figured out how to work. But the final thing of the 10 is forgive. Ask forgiveness and forgive. And in any argument, there's never a 100%, 0% responsibility. Both sides have always got something that they did wrong or could have done better. It may be 90%, 10%, whatever. But when you're both humble and you both realize, there's some things I could have done differently here, then you can resolve it with humility. But if you got the position, I'm right and you're wrong, and you need to change and you need to apologize, you got problems. You're going to have problems. And so we need to be humble. Now, in this, again, another Gary Chapman book is called The 5 Languages of Apology. And this is another we found it a very useful book. And the reason is because what may be an apology to you is not necessarily an apology to another person. The words you use in an apology, you may feel, hey, I really apologized. The other person didn't hear it as an apology. They may have heard it as defensive or whatever. And so understanding what is an apology to each other is very important so that when you're working through things. But I cannot emphasize this enough. In your dynamics, you will have fights, you will have arguments with each other, you will have times that you hurt each other. You need to get to the point that you apologize to each other. That is so absolutely important. If you do it right, it will bring you closer. If you do it wrong, it will build up resentment over time. Aaron is going to talk some more.
Yeah, I really appreciate this point. I learned it in Al's book. He has a really good chapter that goes in depth on this. But before I started implementing this and practicing in like our conflicts and our problems, I used to just say like, I'm sorry, or like, I'm sorry. And it was like hard to actually feel like I'm apologizing because I said I'm sorry like 100 times in the past already. But I think there's a point of like vulnerability that I feel when I say, like, do you forgive me? Because, you know, I can say I'm sorry, but I can't get to a point of saying, you know, do you forgive me until like I've had a sincere apology. And also too, on the other hand, I think like the lesson yesterday, the idea of giving grace, man, I feel so incredible when I hear, when Brandy's like, you know, vice versa, but like, I'm just speaking from my point of view, if Brandy says like, you know, I forgive you, it's like, I really believe that versus like, okay, or like if I say I'm sorry and she's like, you know, but when she says, oh, I forgive you, it's like, oh, like, wow, okay, we're good, we're fully resolved when I hear that I forgive you at the end of the conversation, and then like we're resolved. I was gonna say something else about this. Oh yeah, and then it's okay if like, you know, she's like, I need time, because then I know that she's still working through something, and I gotta be okay with that. Like, hey, you forgive me? Like, are we good? And she's like, I just need like time real quick, and I gotta respect that. So there has been times where I remember there was one time we got into a bump. I forgot the story, but we were just in a bump, and I'm like, hey, like, are you okay? Like I'm sorry, I didn't mean to do that. Will you forgive me? And she's just like, hold on. And literally like 30 seconds later, she came back to me and was like, I forgive you. And it was just such a like, you know, when you feel resolved, you know you're resolved type of deal. And so I think like asking for forgiveness has like brought a great like aspect to our marriage. And now like I never even talked to her about like, hey, let's start saying I forgive you now. But since I started doing that, I've seen that she does the same thing to me. Like she'll ask me to forgive her. And it just makes us feel like, okay, yeah, we're resolved once we can get to a point of I forgive you, you ask for forgiveness. So yeah, that's kind of how we end our little bumps is, do you forgive me? Yeah. Okay, sweet.
Along these lines of forgiveness, I think you need to be careful that you don't trivialize the words I forgive you. Because sometimes we can use that to get off the hook when we're not really at the point of really asking for forgiveness. And, you know, there's sometimes that some things are going to happen in your relationship that are not simple enough to resolve in one conversation. In fact, sometimes you even may have to get some other people involved. And sometimes forgiveness can be like layers of an onion. It doesn't mean, for instance, let's take the worst case that hopefully never happens to any of you, adultery. The guilty party can come back and beg for forgiveness, but it's not simple to say, okay, I forgive you. There's a lot involved. It's going to take longer than just a conversation. And that needs to be understood, giving grace to each other. And sometimes, Gloria and I would get into something that was pretty heavy, and whoever it was that wanted the other one to forgive, the other one might say, you know what, I need to sleep on this. I just need to spend some time with God and get my heart right. And you need to give that space to each other to do whatever it takes to get to the point there really is true forgiveness. And the next point is grow through the hard times. You know, when Gloria and I were married, 20 and 21 years old, we were invincible. We can tackle the world. You know, I was getting my PhD in physics. We were rolling along. Things were great, whatever. Nothing could go wrong. And lo and behold, 2 years later, our first son lived one day and died. At that point, we realized we're not invincible. Hard things can happen in life. And then we sort of had the feeling, okay, God, we paid our dues. Now life is going to be sweet. We had our daughter. Things were fine. And then we had twins, and they lived 2 days. And then we realized that you don't ever get to the point that you paid your dues. You are going to have tough things happen in your life. It's part of life. You know, and you don't really know, did this come from Satan? Did this come from God? Whatever. Your attitude is always, God, use this. Teach me what I need to learn. But I think what I'm trying to say here is, if you use the hard times right, it will actually strengthen your relationship with each other. You know, our losing 3 babies together gave us an experience together that nobody else was ever a part of. We had that experience, we had that shared experience together. We could cry together over it, we had memories over it, and whatever. But we grew through those times. And then we saw that God actually used that because other people suffer losses like that. And so when other people lost babies, guess who they came to for advice? Because they knew that we had gone through things like that and we were able to help them. Now, that's just one example. But the point is, have the spirit of, hey, our life is going to be perfect. Your life is not going to be perfect. You are going to have some hard things happen in your life. But it's going to be your choice as whether those things are going to make you stronger spiritually and stronger in your relationship with each other, or whether it's going to make you bitter and frightful and all those kind of things. It's your choice. But to realize that God's purpose in hard times is to make us stronger with each other and stronger and more dependent on God. Brandy's going to share something.
Yeah, I would say the hard times are easily one of the most influential aspects of any just relationship. And I think a little bit about when Aaron and I were dating, his dad passed away due to COVID. And this was 2 months before we got engaged. And this actually became one of our first goes at a hard time. But it ended up becoming something that we were so grateful for because we got to, have this experience together, and it was more of his than mine. But we got to really see God through this. And I think that this is with hard times is something that I feel so grateful for is my partner and Justin Aaron. And I think something that we have to really take into consideration is who our partner is and who they're going to be through these times. And this is something that I feel like is really important to understand in dating, and most of us are past that, so it's too late. But this understanding that we have to, who we are spiritually independently is really what's going to matter. And I think when we were dating, what I really grew to admire about Aaron was his spiritual integrity, right? Was his ability to love God through everything, and even through his dad passing and other losses that came along with that. I think being able to trust that, to then, again, going back to the foundation of a family, that, okay, cool, like his spiritual integrity is so intact that in 10 years, he'll still be leading our family spiritually, and hoping that he has that same trust in me as I'm going after my own walk with God and going after my integrity with God as well. And I think by the end of our first year of marriage, I think we were like, cool, like we did it, like nothing crazy happened. And part of me feels like we're probably desensitized to what did happen, but his car engine exploded. That set us back a few $1,000s. We led a campus of 40 through COVID, and we had a really huge conflict with a really close mentors of ours, And that experience really set us back spiritually for a few months. And I think for both Aaron and I, we almost like took turns on who was going to not do great that day. But it was one of those things where, again, like we really got to depend on each other's spiritual integrity and really get each of us through that little season of life. And ultimately, it became so beautiful because, again, you learn, like, you're in this together, you're sharing these experiences together, you're growing closer to God together in a way that, like Al was saying, nothing else can come into that. No one else is a part of that. So it doesn't make me want more hard times, but it definitely makes me very appreciative of them once they're over. And so.
Next, and this is absolutely crucial if you've not done it yet, find a mentoring couple for your marriage. We need eyes and ears on our marriage, because in our relationship with one another, we are not objective with each other. Guess what? We don't want to be objective with each other. We don't want to see all of our flaws. We don't want to see all of our faults. We want to think our partner hung the moon. We need another couple in our life that sees us in reality and sees our strengths and our weaknesses, is open with us and can share with us and can tell us what we need to hear. And when we have a conflict that we're not able to resolve, we can go to the couple and they can be objective in helping us go through this. Now, I think one of the problems that we have sometimes in having a couple like this is that we are selectively open with them. And that won't work very well because they don't really know you. They need to go the good, bad, and ugly about you and your relationship with each other. You need to be totally open with them. Now, for it to really work well, you need a couple who is also open with their life. Now, sometimes that doesn't happen, and that's all right. But you feel a lot better if they're also open with their struggles and whatever. But generally, it's going to be better if they're ahead of you in life, that they've had some experiences that you haven't had yet that can help you work through. But you know what? That's not absolutely essential either. I'll probably say some more about this a little bit later. Even another newlywed couple can help you in that, because they're not going to be as emotionally involved. They can be more objective than you are. And that's what you really need, is someone that you can be totally, frankly, brutally open with, and your victories, your defeats, your struggles, your whatever, and they can speak the truth to you in love. And Aaron is going to talk about this.
Yeah, so Brandy and I are blessed. We actually do have like a few like couples that are older than us that can help us out in our marriage that we go to, some mentors. But I think what Al was saying, like, you know, about the peers, we have a group of like 3 young married people in our ministry or in our church that we kind of get with consistently and talk through our marriages and stuff like that. And it's really good, and I value and appreciate everything they say. But sometimes, you know, there's different topics, like when it comes to like sex or I don't know, just different things that I don't know who's right on how to handle a certain situation because I'm like, bro, we're in the same stage of life. So I think that's when, you know, having a mentor couple that has seen marriages and their own marriage is really good, that you can really trust what they have to say about certain topics. And so I know, like, for Brandy and I, we have a few. One that's like knows everything about our lives, like we work with them and things like that. And then we have really close friends who just, you know, they're not in the ministry or anything like that. So they just are there to talk to us about our marriage. You know, they talk to us about their marriage. And that's been really good. And I think we're a lot more open. You know, we're even like the idea of like sex. We talked about that earlier. You know, getting advice in that area can be really like, I think the scariest part, I think, for Brandy and I. So that's something that we're even still continually trying to work towards, of like how open we are about our sex life, because we could use help in that area. You know what I mean? So, or not like we can use help, but like we want to have, we want to have that open door of like, if we, you know, we need to talk about certain things, you know, but I think that's just something that I want to mention. Like, it could be hard to really get there with different people that you allow into your life. Like I was saying, trying to get there. So that's something that we're continuing to think about too. Yeah, and I think the next part we'll talk about is finances. Like I have a couple who's really good with finances, and they help us out in our finances and stuff like that. So, but yeah, mentor. Oh, another thing. So in our church, with young couples that just got married, I think it is imperative to be intentional with finding mentoring couples. That's why I said we're really blessed to have mentoring couples. But I know that, you know, it could be a struggle sometimes finding that couple that, you know, really relates to you. But I do think it's an intentional thing. Like, you got to go after it to find that. So I know, like, with the guys that I'm in a group with, you know, that's what we try to challenge each other with. Like, who's that older person? You know, we're talking right here, right now. That's cool. But, like, who else is going to be helping us in our marriage? Because sometimes I know it can get isolating if you don't have a mentor couple. So, yeah.
In L.A., like 20 years ago, Gloria and I realized that you always got a group of newlyweds, generally in your church. Very seldom are you the only couple. And so we thought it would be good to start getting couples together. So what we did, we started a group that had been married less than a year. And we'd meet together once a month together. And that turned to be one of the most fun things that Gloria and I have ever done. Because we did, like I say, we did that for like 20 years. And so after they'd been married for a year, they graduated from the class. And they'd get together, their last time together with the class, they'd tell them what they learned in the last year. So they'd sort of give a charge to the group. But the interesting thing in that was, and it shows the power of having an outside couple in your life, is that when we started the group, usually Gloria and I'd come in with a lesson and we'd have a response and all of that. And then we started sharing it by having different ones teaching it. But what happened was you get a group of 10 couples together that have been married less than a year. I guarantee you, one of them had a good fight that day. And the group got to be really open with each other, and so a couple would come in that just really had a disagreement, and we got to the point and say, okay, who's had a good fight today or this week? Who wants to share it? And they got to be really open, and so they would share it, and then Gloria and I would sort of counsel them in the group. But then we got the idea, hey, why don't we see what everybody else thinks? And the amazing thing was, and it showed us, that when you're not emotionally involved, you know the right thing to do. It's really interesting, and it really shows the power of another couple. Because, I mean, this couple would share very openly. I mean, sometimes even the sexual relationship in this group, they got to be a really open group. But we would kind of throw, okay, guys, what would you tell them? You know what? They would tell them the right answers every time. And it just shows the fact you need other people in your life that are spiritual and that can hopefully even further along than you are in marriage. That's really the best. But even if you don't have that, even if you have another couple that's in your stage of life who can really be open with that, you guys can help each other. Now, this is basically discipling 101 that we all believe in. That's what we believe in the ICOC. But you need that in your marriage. And if you don't have that in your marriage, you're setting yourself up for some pain that you don't have to have, because it would really help you to have that. And so I can't encourage that enough. And so the last point is handle your finances responsibly. This is also one of the 3 top areas of problems in marriage. It's finances. And number one that we said was communication and expectations. But finances is one of the top 3 areas that we get into. And Aaron's going to talk about this.
Yeah, so our honeymoon, best week of my life. And then getting home, worst fight of our marriage was about finances because, you know, we had a plan about me going back to school and having that set up. And we had talked about it in the past, but I didn't communicate fully what the plan was on how to pay for school. And I was like, yeah, it's coming straight out of the savings account. And she's like, huh? Like, no, we don't have any, like, financial aid, no grants, you have any scholarships, nothing. I was like, no, I can't get, there was, like, a situation happening. But, so it was just, like, nerve-wracking of, like, thousands of dollars just going out of our account without her realizing that was going to happen. That was, like, what, 2 months into our marriage, a month in or something like that. And so that got really dicey really fast. And it wasn't really about the money. It was like, you know, the heart, trust, you know, me leading and stuff like that. And so, yeah, we had to talk through it. And that led to us getting a hold of a family, which we know that are really good. They shepherd the campus ministry, but they're really amazing with their finances. And so, you know, we got in touch with them. They sat down with us, and they talked through what it looks like to have a budget, to talk to each other about how you're spending your money. And so it was really helpful with them. You know, I got back with him over and over again, but I have this budget now that Brandy and I look at together. You know, at first, for the next 6 months after that situation, it was every 2 weeks we were like, all right, let's look at, you know, where every single dollar is going from our account. And now it's probably about every month we look at our budget because it is very vital of, like, what are we doing with our money? And what it has done, it's actually helped us, you know, serve God better and honor God with our finances. We've actually, like, in the past, when I was single, I would just, you know, I have, like, direct deposit to the church. I'd give to the church. But now looking at our budget, I'm like, oh, we could do a whole lot more with our money, even together. And so, you know, we've been able to give more to God. And then also, too, with, you know, we saved up money to go on, like, a mission trip. We were like, well, we can, like, plan out our money. We could plan to go do stuff. And so we went on a mission trip that we, you know, help fund and stuff like that. And so it was really cool. Like, that was something that we wouldn't have done without managing our finances in a good way. But yes, I think it's really important to look at your money. I think that's what we learned. It's like, all right, we got to be on top of what we're doing with our money because it could be really easy to just make decisions that aren't wise. So yeah, I think to, like, find somebody in the church there's a lot of people in the ICOC that have great finances. Go talk to them, see what they're doing. If most of us are young, at least for me, like we work in the ministry, so it could be really easy to not know what to do with our money or to spend our money in an unwise way. So, yeah, finances, important.
Well, guys, that's it. We miraculously covered 10 points, and we're time to quit now. But final slide here. Hopefully, this is the way you feel right now. The goal is to feel that way 50 years from now. That's what you want. You want your marriage to grow, and you need to expect it to get better and better and better. That's number one. That's what God wants. You know, He invented marriage, and He wants it to be great. And it can be great if you do it the right way. And so we think we've given you some steps. There's obviously a lot more involved in this, but hopefully this has been helpful to you today. Thank you so much for coming, and God bless.